you're all living with a chronic condition. And as we know, any chronic condition, a lot of you've got more than just aspergillosis. Some of you've got COPD, you've got bronchiectasis, you've got asthma on top of it. And a lot of these, as you'll know, they require a lot more than just medical intervention. So chronic illnesses, they demand lots of things from the patients who are suffering with them: emotional resilience, being adaptable, understanding your condition, physical strength, patient, centered strategies that you can work on with with your clinicians or your GPs. And all these things have proven quite successful from studies that I've read in managing illnesses and improving overall well-being and health outcomes in general. So that's on top of just taking medication. So as many of you know, the journeys, it's quite a bit of a roller coaster. It's pretty much, it's difficult a lot of the time particularly when you're first diagnosed. But having a chronic condition like aspergillosis, it doesn't have to, it doesn't have to mean that you have to endure a life of constant suffering. So what do we mean when we talk about manageable? So it doesn't mean that you're going to make your illness completely disappear, or that you'll no longer feel the symptoms or the effects of it. What we mean by manageable is more that the symptoms can be controlled to an extent where they're not dictating everything about your life or hindering an ability to just function in your normal day-to-day activities. So managing it involves developing quite tailored, because it's very individual, as we often talk about in these meetings. It involves a tailored approach that incorporates not only the medications or the treatments that you're on, but adaptations to your lifestyle, looking after your emotional well-being, and also, again, because you're all here, so you all know it, and this, getting the social support when you need it around you. So, as we've mentioned, chronic conditions require more than just medication. So, a few of the key components of this approach. So, as we mentioned before, you've got your emotional resilience, your adaptability, your understanding, your physical strength. And if we break down a little bit more into these, in terms of understanding your illness, knowledge is power. If you understand your symptoms, like Gwyneth was saying before, you'll go for a walk, but you don't go, frolicking through the leaves and the trees. You know your limitations in terms of how and where you can go, and what's gonna trigger your symptoms, what's gonna make them worse. So by knowing these things, that's going to help you manage it more effectively. Another element of that is understanding what the possible progression of the illness is, because if you understand how it might progress, you can recognize those signs and symptoms of progression earlier, speak with the medical teams that are looking after you, and get possible changes in medication, get additional treatments earlier on. Asking questions, asking doctors questions, your physiotherapists if you're under a respiratory physio, asking other people questions within these groups, us, as many of you do. A lot of you are already very good at that. You are good at the side of things of looking at your own research and reading up on the condition. If there's something that you ever read that you don't understand, we are always available to ask questions, even if we need to kind of read it and understand it a little bit ourselves. Typically we can help you break down these things and understand them a bit deeper. And obviously you're all here, so this is not something for those of you who are live on the meeting right now, but for anybody watching this later on YouTube or through the Facebook group, consider coming along to one of these support groups, because the wealth of experience and the things that you can learn from the people that come along, in some ways it far surpasses what we can tell you as a team. So if you're ever wanting to come along to them, they're very welcoming, so please just come along to them. So one of the other aspects is, again, that's something that's just come up in the earlier part of this meeting, is about acknowledging your limitations. So when we're talking about acknowledging limitations when you're living with a chronic condition like aspergillosis, there's a metaphor that we mention quite a lot in these meetings, that captures the struggle quite well, and that's when we talk about spoon theory, which, as we know, many of you have heard before. So spoon theory was coined by a lady called Christine Miserandino, and it's helpful for the chronic illness community because it kind of explains the energy that's needed when you're living with a chronic condition. So in the analogy, the spoons, each spoon represents a unit of energy. And every day a person has you have a limited number of spoons, and you've got to budget those spoons and to the activities that you do to make sure that you don't run out of the spoons before the day ends. So in terms of, relating this to acknowledging limitations with aspergillosis, there's a few different limitations, as you will all be aware. There's the physical limitations. So one of the top symptoms we hear from people when we talk about living with aspergillosis is fatigue and breathlessness, and they in themselves, they might take up more spoons than what than what they do for other people, and it can vary from individual to individual. So understanding your body's signals and making sure that you rest when you need to, that's going to help you save some, to not use up all your spoons and be able to get yourself through the day. One of the other areas is the emotional limitations. So chronic illnesses are, they're emotionally draining, as you will all know, and it's normal to feel uncertain and anxious about your condition. According to a study I read with the National Institute of Mental Health, people living with chronic illnesses may be more likely to suffer from depression, and as such, depression, it's a common complication of a chronic illness. So managing feelings, of anxiety and depression, that in itself requires spoons and energy. But part of that is acknowledging how you're feeling emotionally and seeking help and support when you need it. And that can help you manage that side of your energy better. Social limitations. Now, this is something that we've talked, we talked a lot about in the meetings, that the weekly meetings we have on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and it's sometimes while it's important to maintain a social life and ensure that you're doing the things that you would do. Sometimes you just physically don't have the energy to do it. So it's important to recognize that you might actually need to prioritize yourself over your family or over your friends, and go into these, go into events or going out for a coffee. Sometimes you might just need to say, you know what, I can't do that today. I just haven't got enough energy for it. And then there's often not some people do still work when they have this condition, when they're diagnosed. So there can be limitations around what you can do in terms of your day job. As we all know, work takes a lot of energy out of you, and the energy that you use, it's got to be factored into that budget of spoons that you have. And sometimes you're going to need to have conversation with the people that you work with and your managers, HR department, if you need to adjust your workload or your responsibilities to ensure that your health needs are being met. Having a chronic illness doesn't always mean that's the end of your working life. Sometimes, hopefully a good employer will be able to find a way that you can still continue to work, but one that kind of it helps you still manage your condition at the same time. So, understanding this spoon theory and applying it to your daily life, it can be quite useful, and we know people in this group who've used it themselves in helping you to acknowledge and manage those limitations. So it's like we mentioned earlier, it's not about resigning yourself to them. The amount of spoons you've got, it might shift from day to day. One day you might, I don't know, might have 10 metaphorical spoons, but another day you might have 5. And it's about becoming understanding your condition and becoming effective at working around the limitations. As I said, it's completely individual. Everyone will have a different amount of spoons each day, so you need the people around you to respect and acknowledge those, your individual boundaries and limitations. So something else that we talk about quite a lot in this group is exercise. Most people who've done it at some point, which most of you have, it plays a really important role in helping us maintain health and well-being, even when we don't have a chronic condition. So regular physical activity can, in general, improve quality of life. It increases your mood, enhances your lung function, and it helps you strengthen the immune system. But the thought of exercise when you've got a chronic condition and you aren't feeling well anyway is obviously quite daunting. And given the constraints that you can have with a chronic condition like aspergillosis, it's about finding what works best for you. So, find an exercise that suits your abilities. So the objective of exercise when you've got a chronic condition, it's not about exhausting yourself. It's not about going out for a 10-mile run and making sure that you're absolutely battered by the end of it. It's about gradually improving your physical endurance and strength within your limits. So low intensity activities such as walking, stretching, chair-based workouts. I know several of you do chair-based workouts. They can be really beneficial ways to kind of start on an exercise program. Even the smallest of things like doing, the hoovering up when when you're feeling up to it, and other household kind of work, that contributes to daily exercise as well. It's more about just getting yourself up and moving. Another one is pulmonary rehabilitation. Again, I know a few of you have you've been to pulmonary rehab, and obviously these are programs that are specifically designed for people with lung conditions. They involve that you work with a medical team, typically physios, and they involve a combination of exercises to improve lung function, but you also get the education side of it and emotional support as well. And you'll always be supervised by professionals. Breathing exercises, something again that we talk about a lot. We've had Phil on doing talks before. He's talked about things like pursed lip breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, and these things can help. They can help improve your lung function and help you to manage the breathlessness that you often experience with CPA and ABPA. Another one, yoga, meditation. So very gentle yoga poses. I know we've got a few people who do yoga in this group. Yoga poses with mindful breathing can improve your flexibility, your balance, your strength, and they also help manage the stress side of things as well. Staying consistent. We've probably all at some point, and I know I do it myself. You get yourself into a routine, but it can be quite easy to sometimes fall out of that routine. So staying consistent is one of the key to it. It's if you stay consistent, that's more beneficial than doing doing an intense workout once or twice a week. If you can do something very light, even 10 to 15 minutes of exercise every day, that's better for you rather than doing 30, 40 minutes of heavy exercise once a week. And as your endurance builds, you gradually increase the duration, and potentially, if you were feeling up to it, the intensity of your workouts. We always say, you're all under different care teams. Some of you are under us here at NAC as well. We're respiratory consultants. You've got GPs. If you are brand new to exercise and you're concerned, obviously always speak to your care teams before starting a new exercise. They can guide you. They can tell you, the absolute things you can't do and what, if you're unsure, what you can do within the limits of your own conditions. And most importantly, listen to your body. If you feel extremely tired or you experience difficulty breathing while you're exercising, that's your body saying, right, it's time to stop now. Acknowledging your limits it's not a weakness. It's just an essential part of managing your health. So the last slide I'm going to talk about before I move on to some of the bits that patients have sent through to us is the mental health side of it. So living with a chronic condition, like we mentioned this earlier before, it's physically challenging, but it takes a huge toll on your mental health. As we said, anxiety, depression, stress, feelings of isolation, they're not uncommon, and they do very often, you see them hand in hand with chronic conditions. Acknowledging them and finding ways to manage them, it's as important as managing the physical symptoms of the illness, because it can come, as many of us know, the mental health side of things can impact the physical side, and if you're not managing one, it will impact the other, and you get stuck in a cycle of one just having a knock-on effect to the other all the time. So if you understand that, so chronic illnesses, they lead to this range of emotional responses. Obviously, particularly when you're first diagnosed, you're fearful, about the condition. You don't always understand it. It's not always greatly explained in those initial appointments. You don't particularly know what the future holds. You can have, as you start to understand the condition, if you're having a bad day, you develop frustration over the physical limitations or feelings of isolation because of, changes in your lifestyle, or the inability of your families and your friends to understand what it's like. And again, we know that many of you do that. It can be difficult to talk to your families, and they don't understand it. They've never heard of it. So when people have never heard of it, then if you say cancer to someone, everybody knows cancer straight away. Cancer, bad. Aspergillosis, they don't know what it is, so there's no understanding, and that in itself can be a big driver of depression and mental health, is when you haven't got that support network around you. But understanding that these are, they're normal. Anyone who's been in the position of having a chronic illness will at some point have felt this way about it, and understanding that's one of the first steps in addressing it. Communication is one of the most powerful things that we've got in the bag for managing mental health, and it's about being open. So about being open with family, friends, here in a support group environment like this, or or with your GP, or a professional counsellor if you need to. Talking about how you're feeling, it can provide relief, and it can offer new perspectives on things that you can do to manage it. So obviously with that, the next, is professional help. Don't ever be scared to seek professional help if you need it. It is available. It is there. It's not a weakness. There's psychologists out there, therapists, and they can help with strategies to cope with stress and help you understand it and manage the anxiety and depression that, as you said, often comes along. Things like cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is proven very beneficial to people living with chronic conditions. Mindfulness is a big thing that we've obviously, it's a big thing that we hear a lot more since COVID, because we know the effect that COVID had on mental health, with people being isolated. But that's proven very successful in helping reduce stress and anxiety in people. And there's lots of other things that you can utilize to help navigate the mental health side of things. Don't really need to tell all of you about peer support. Again, this applies to anyone who's watching this video after the fact. But we talk about peer support a lot, and obviously you already realize the benefits of it because you're here. But connecting with others who are dealing with similar experiences is one of the most helpful things that's available. You can talk to each other, you can get tips on how other people manage, and you get to learn more about your condition from people who share that experience with you. And it helps you realize that you're not alone as well. Self-care. So again, this is, it's kind of goes back to those spoons that we were talking about earlier. So prioritize yourself. Be selfish if you need to. Do the things that you enjoy and that help you relax and make you feel good. Things like reading, listening to music, gardening if you can with your condition, and if you're wearing masks, and obviously within the limits of not exacerbating your symptoms. try and, if you had hobbies before your diagnosis, try and find a way that you can continue with them to help, you know, to help keep that kind of balance in your life. Uh, and then just remember that, depression's not, it's not a weakness. It's, it's not just the physical discomfort and limitations that pose a challenge in chronic illness. The emotional side of it and the burden with that can sometimes weigh heavier than the physical symptoms of the disease itself. As we said, it's a common complication, but it doesn't have to be a normal part of it, and uh, you don't have to just put up with it. You know, it's understand that depression can manifest itself in the feeling of sadness that doesn't go away, loss of interest in things that you used to enjoy, difficulty sleeping, changes in appetite. And it's really important to recognize these symptoms and seek help if you need to. uh it's all right to have tough days. You're not defined by your illness, and it's okay to ask for help when you need it. Celebrate the good days and accept that the bad days will come as well, and just focus on the things that'll help you navigate the challenges. So, there's one other area I haven't actually got a slide for, because I don't really need to feel like we need to cover it loads, but it was something that kept coming up when I was looking at elements to include in this. It's obviously sticking to your medication regime, which I know from speaking to all of you at some point, that is something that you do all do. And it's making sure that you take your medication when you need to, take your inhalers when you need to, your steroids, your antifungals, any medication that you're on, sticking to that. Not making sure that if you miss a dose, keep taking it. But as I said, I haven't done a slide for it because I don't really feel like I need to go into too much detail with that. So I'm gonna I didn't so two people very kindly sent me over some emails about their thoughts on living with a chronic condition, and I didn't want to, given the time that the people have taken to put these emails together, I didn't want to chop them down, because I appreciate that this is their story and that this is what they want to say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you what was sent to me by these two people. So the first one we had was came through was about a diagnosis of ABPA, and this person says, you're told you've got ABPA, it's a chronic condition, there's no cure, but we can manage it. And she says these words came from a respiratory consultant who had taken over the case in a new hospital when she spent 2 years previously searching for answers and had been told that it looked like cancer, which many of you with aspergillosis have been down a similar diagnostic kind of road. She says initially the focus on it, can be managed, but the reality of what that means is it's not clearly laid out in those first appointments. And if it is, you just don't have time to take it in. You're kind of given the sense that with the right medication, all will be normal. But it takes a while for the meds to kick in, but eventually life will get back to normal. And then eventually you realize that that's not the case. And you start to realize that aspergillosis is very individual. Despite the various forms, CPA or ABPA, it's very individual in how it manifests and how you can respond to the treatment, because you can develop resistance, or you can have heightened reactions to it. So it's never just as straightforward as you get diagnosed, we're going to give you this condition, we're going to give you these medications, and your condition is going to be manageable. She says in the initial sense, life was manageable, but then medication started to have side effects. And because medicine's, it's not an exact science, it's weighing up the benefits versus the risks of taking the medication. And you know that even when you're yet to be diagnosed, chronic illness often becomes multiple illnesses because of medications and other things that come around with it. So each person tends to be managing a unique combination of conditions. So she goes on to talk about how she copes. So she says, my nature is I want to understand how things work. and this extends into medical situations. I trained as a nurse, so I'm familiar with medical texts. My daughter's a palliative care physician, her husband's an anaesthetist. I think at first I thought that if I could understand all that was going on within my body, then I could better cope with the situation. To a degree, this is helpful. Uh, I read an ungodly number of medical journals and I ask a great number of questions. However, a far more difficult aspect of the chronic illness is the battle of the mind. Back in the 80s, I'd suffered from depression, so when signs of it surfaced again, I was a little alarmed, but I had the tools to recognise and process this, along with having been through a traumatic loss of my husband. I'd, I'd, I'd use that to facilitate a grief recovery programme, and managing chronic illness involves a great deal of grief. Besides the ABPA and the cavities in the lungs from multiple cases of severe pneumonia, been diagnosed with a number of other conditions, including adrenal insufficiency, bronchiectasis, COPD, and the list goes on. It's the past history and the multiple conditions that really messes with how I cope as an individual. Each condition could be manageable on its own and not that painful, but the combination of all of them factor and creates factors at times that make it feel like it's just too much. So for me, my faith in the sovereignty, grace, and goodness of God is the key to my coping. I believe that the Bible is the truth of God revealed, so I continually go back to the scriptures to try and understand the purpose for which I'm here on earth. Adjusting to the new normals as my health deteriorates, or enjoying the good days when they come. It would be fair to say that I've been called a workaholic in the past, so not being able to do all the things that I think need doing or I would like to do has been hard. I talk often to Jesus about these situations and I ask for guidance. I look at the scripture to understand what is really important, and my relationship with the Lord is what prepares me for my eternity with Him. Let's be honest, there are days when the pain is so great that dying and being with Christ does sound like a good option, but most of the time, to live is to gain. Because of my need to understand my condition, these support groups are vital. As we share experiences, I learn more, but it also helps see that my situation isn't that bad. Generally, puts the situation into perspective. I've always tried to be an encouragement to others, and I hope that I'm continuing to do so through these channels. To have people to talk to who do not need explanations and will allow a bit of a grump from me from time to time is helpful. The groups provide incentive and they provide reminders to work on the things that can help, but I'm procrastinating on. Use it or lose it has become a coping strategy mantra of mine. So I work hard on exercise and a good diet, etc., to push on and do things as I tread the fine line between doing and resting. I am grateful for the tremendous amount of support that I have, even in a faltering public health system. But it's supplemented by my children who are doctors, the National Aspergillosis Trust support, and my family that provide me and care in lots of different ways. I'm in a privileged position of being retired, so I no longer have to work. Not that retirement was something I was hoping for, but life didn't turn out the way I wanted. My health was deteriorating so much that the moment I turned 65, I resigned. The bottom line in living and managing with a chronic illness is to monitor my mental health. How I am thinking about my condition greatly affects the outcomes. We will each have different challenges and unique combinations of illnesses. I can only do the best I can, helping myself with the things that can make a difference and then accepting the things that cannot be challenged and make the most of what I can still do. And that's one of the patient emails that came through. The second one, I am very conscious that my journey with chronic illness began in early childhood due to bronchiectasis, so is somewhat different to the experience of many patients who develop aspergillosis in one form or another later in life. I often wonder whether my experience in childhood shaped my attitude to coping with my condition throughout my life. I had been poorly throughout my earliest years and I was diagnosed by the local children's hospital. After the diagnosis, I remember going with my mum to see the school doctor, and I can still visualise the building. It was proposed that I be removed from primary school to attend a sort of boarding school where the day was spent between study and treatment. I was so scared and upset at the thought of being sent away. Before my mum died in her 90s, we talked about this. I wanted to know if I didn't go due to my reaction, maybe a tantrum or not. But it turns out that my parents were against the idea too. In later years, I came to reflect on that situation and I wondered if it contributed to my sort of defiance and trying to keep up with my peers, despite missing out on so much education. Did come a time when that had to stop, though. In my late 20s, I was employed in the civil service. I realised I couldn't maintain my job to recurring infection and subsequent sick leave, and I duly resigned. Amazingly, HR revoked my resignation, and the Civil Service Medical Commissioners in London awarded me medical retirement, complete with my pension lump sum. I was 28 at the time. It was so unexpected, but it was a blessing. From then on, I was determined not to hide my limitations. So, my advice is this: recognize your limitations, avoid activity cycling. When one does too much on good days, but which then causes a decline and sets you back, and then you pick up, you do too much again, and it becomes a vicious cycle. Understand that people aren't mind readers. When you see something, mature, household or otherwise, that appears glaringly obvious and in need of attention, that at one time you would tackle with ease, speak up to a family member or a friend and don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't neglect beneficial chest physio. My dad was quite proficient at percussion when I was a child, then my husband, then my son. Not anymore due to my osteoporosis, though. Perhaps if it seems too much of a chore, share with someone else close to you and they could help or encourage you. And that is the end of the 2 patient stories. So ultimately, to finish up, a condition being manageable, it's about harnessing your own power as an individual. Take control of the condition. Don't let it control you. Ultimately, it's about realizing that while you can't get rid of your illness, these are lifelong conditions. It doesn't mean that you're not going to live a meaningful, fulfilling life, enjoying the things you want.
Just thought I'd sum up the pandemic in one slide, which is quite good. This is the length of time of the entire COVID pandemic that we've gone through so far. Here we are now, and as you can see, decline, 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 and it's still going down. And this is a new thing, because as you can see, everywhere, every other time this has happened, we've gone down and back up again, down, back up. We seem to be just going down. And I can show you another curve in a sec, which adds a little bit to that. It's gone so far down. The only 2 times that we've had so few cases were at this point and at this point, and both of these were followed. This is a shutdown, a lockdown that forced that number of cases to drop and to drop and to drop. I think there were about 200 or 300 cases here, and then we had 2 more lockdowns. One was just, I think that's early November. And then I think Boris decided to try and give us a Christmas, but then I think we had Christmas and then we had to lock down again, and that forced this one. But in between, we had our vaccination program began in early December. And since vaccination, we released this lockdown sort of around here, and it gradually started to go up. But instead of doing this, more and more people were vaccinated, and it blunted the sort of peaks. Then along came Omicron, which is the current virus around here, which is late 2021. And ever since, we've had different variants of Omicron. But the take-home message is we're right now at the lowest levels that we've had in the entire pandemic, which is really good. This was slightly, I think this, I haven't put a date on this, but I think we're about 2 weeks out of date at the end there. Is it still going down? And you can get the information on that through here. So this is the Zoe data, which is the much more rapidly assimilated data, which millions of people were putting on their mobile phone apps. Whether or not they've got COVID has constructed this curve. It's been extremely accurate. It's reflected the government statistics all the way along, but this is more recent. And as you can see right at the end here, we're only going to November 2021 here, so it's not the whole pandemic. You see at the end here, we were going down just as the other graph goes down, and then there is a new variant around, a new variant of Omicron. And that seemed to level it out a bit, but I think that new variant probably accounted for that small peak, and maybe there was another variant, but it's really flattening out and carrying on going down. So again, this is unlike any other part of the pandemic. So something different seems to be happening at the moment, which is all going in the right direction. So that's really good news. Let's hope it keeps going down. This data is valid up to the 3rd of July, so it's pretty recent data, and it's still going down as of today. So fingers crossed that keeps going down, and we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel finally. 2023 vaccines, we know the spring vaccination program is now finished. That finished at the end of June. So at the moment you can't get a vaccination, but there will be an autumn booster campaign. That was confirmed by the health minister, Mr. Barclay, in January, but we've got no details of what's going to happen yet. There is a JVCI request of what should happen, but it's not been confirmed whether we're going to be doing that. The JVCI request was, I think, over 50s or over 55s would be offered the vaccination in the autumn, but nothing's confirmed. We've got no dates yet, and it would be logical that older and more vulnerable peoples will be offered this vaccine. Younger people really are getting to the situation where the risk of the vaccination is getting close to the risk of the outcome of them getting COVID. So for younger people, the vaccination is starting to become pretty unnecessary by the autumn. But of course, as we know, things can change quite quickly in this field. But at the moment, that's what it seems to be. There was this new variant, as we've just seen. It really hasn't made much of an impact on case numbers, so that's really good. And this was a very this was the most good at infecting variant that we've seen so far, and it really didn't have much impact, so that's great. So basically we carry on as we are. It's getting less and less. I think we're down to about 1 in 100 people probably have a case of COVID at the moment. So it's really, this is not May, this should be July. I update these slides, but I always miss one thing out somewhere. Anyway, that's annoying.
So can everybody see Beth's presentation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Obviously the title is How to Keep Cool in Hot Weather. Beth, I'll let you take it from there.
In perfect mind, here you go.
So we're just going to let you all have a bit of a read of the slides. Obviously, we've got some of the tips there. So stick into the shade, wearing a hat with a nice wide brim on it. Cowboy hat's optional. Sunglasses. Obviously, some of these tips are also very good for those of you who are on antifungal medication, because we know that that can increase your sensitivity to sunlight. Wear nice loose cotton clothes. Light meals really help keep you cool. Stay inside midday. Hottest time of the day is 11 till 2. So obviously if you stay indoors during those times, wear sunscreen and unplug some of your electronics if you can, because they do generate quite a lot of heat in the house. Ice cubes in a hot water bottle. Keep yourself hydrated. Ice cubes in a hot water bottle, hold it against your neck and on the inside of your elbows. Pop it into your bed. A 1 to 2 litre pop bottle lasts much longer than an ice pack. So I'm assuming that's if you freeze it.
Put it in front of your fan.
Yes, yeah. Fan and a battery pack. So you can fit it in your handbag, leave it in your glove compartment, use it for days out when you don't know if there's shade. Never pack your batteries in your airplane. Hold luggage. Car foil sunshades, less than £10, or you can use a bath towel. Really good, because obviously it keeps, we've all probably had that feeling where you get in the car. My children shouted at me the other day because the leather seats of the car were far too hot. And here we go, Chris.
Yeah. I
Uh,
thought that would have thought of this, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good
Nice.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What have we got here? Little translucent powder on the bridge of your nose can help your glasses from slipping. If you've got an airbed, it may be cooler to sleep downstairs. If you've got any windows that you can open in your attic, heat risers. So obviously that'll let some of the heat out of the roof of your
Shrub
property.
What's that?
Shrub rub.
Shrub rub shorts to prevent chafing.
Never heard of them.
Yeah.
Where
There
would
you
I
go.
get translucent powder from?
It's just a makeup powder, so you get it in the
Again, where?
supermarket. It's one of the ones that's in a compact.
Oh,
You
right.
just asked. You
One
asked
in your desk
Jackie.
drawer, Graham. I can
that's
work
very
for
good.
later. It's one in your desk.
We'll have a makeup session
I'll
later.
go and get my powder pop and dust you over.
Yeah.
and it is a really quick update of COVID.